Okay, everybody, welcome back to our first episode of 2018 of Game Nexus Live. We're coming at you with the regular crew tonight. We've got Stewart, Josh, and myself, Dwayne, talking tonight about a few different subjects. Compared to our normal two, we've sort of ballooned it up a little bit to flesh it out. Just so you are aware, Stewart, you don't have your lower third tonight, so I guess we have to run an introduction. So just so there's no confusion, we'll go around the table so you guys all know who we are. We have Josh in his creepy little closet, and Josh is our video content manager, and I swear to God, one of these days that door is going to open and someone's going to grab you.
Closed. Okay, don't worry. It may happen one day, but not today.
And then we have Stewart, our tabletop manager, who evidently is incarcerated and about to get a mugshot. Because it looks like he's standing on a white wall.
They let me do this podcast before booking me. So
okay. Yeah. And we have myself, co-founder of the Game Nexus, and I tackle the site, the marketing, and most of the design work. So the three of us combined will give you guys a good tour of the podcast tonight. So topics tonight, we're going to talk about 4 topics tonight. We're going to kick things off with something that's been batting around in my head for a while, and I'm going to affectionately call it the PUBG effect. And for those of you who don't know, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is quite a big deal these days. Having said that, I don't really know the background of the game besides I know what the game's all about. I'm going to throw to Josh and Stu on this one because I think you guys know a little bit more about where the game came from and how long it's been out in the wild. So I'll throw to you, Josh, to kick it off and then give us some background on PUBG.
Oh, background. I did not study for this one.
Well, Stu, who's up on it more than...
I mean, I don't know the background per se, but I mean, well, it's like, the sort of preeminent like mass battleground shooter last man standing format game on the market right now.
Well, from what I know, the game is based on an Arma mod, much like DayZ uses that same Russian landscape that looks so familiar. Mm-hmm. It just came out of nowhere as far as I know. Josh, if you've got info there, but it just came out of nowhere, quite literally, as far as people are playing it like crazy. And I'm assuming that most yourselves probably saw and heard about other people playing it and jumped on it, right?
Mm-hmm. It actually started. PUBG was not the first.
No, there was H1Z1. It was very similar.
Which started it off, and then I don't know what sparked PUBG. I don't know if it was just it came around the time when streamers were big and people watched streamers, and then it's like, oh my gosh, insert Twitch streamers playing this. I want to play with him or play this, and that's where it kind of just boomed.
It just caught on like wildfire in a dry brush.
Pretty much. I mean, like it's the same thing with like League of Legends and Dota. That thing just blew up.
Now, as far as the game because it originated on PC, I know it just came to Xbox One. It's a free-to-play game, correct, or no?
No. I mean, the PC version it's like $30, I think, 30 Canadian.
Okay, yeah, because there's nothing you can buy in game, right? So they wouldn't make it free.
Yeah,
you can buy stuff in game.
You can buy loot boxes, which we've talked about.
Yeah, and talked about.
We'll leave it there, but.
So this game is, suffice to say, this game is just going nuts right now as far as everybody playing it. The topic specifically that I wanted to talk about is not only are you seeing, this game at its core doing well, I'm starting to see a trend where games that have already been out in the wild and doing their own thing are now trying to start to capitalize on the Battle Royale game mode. So specifically, you've got Fortnite, and that was a very public event when they rolled out Fortnite Battle Royale. Is the developers of PUBG literally tried suing them or tried taking them to task on it because they felt that it was an infringement on their copyright. And then we have Hi-Rez Studios, the developers of Paladins and Smite. They're doing a battle royale mode for Paladins, which is called Paladins Battlegrounds. So specifically tonight, the topic is, are developers jumping on this bandwagon just because it's popular? And then do we see this becoming a thing where we're going to see just a swarm of these types of games, just like you saw with MOBAs and zombie co-op shooters and such? So let's kick it off with Josh. What's your thoughts on the PUBG effect?
I almost feel like it is going to explode and it is going to become the thing. The thing I've always been interested about is why PUBG is the leading edge, or the one that took off. I mean, if we look at other ones in that category, like I guess the sister game Fortnite and stuff, PUBG doesn't have a lot in it. Like, there's no traps to my knowledge, unless that's new that they've added. There's no building. There's no anything. It is straight out just get a gun, shoot people, win kind of thing. But I would definitely say tournaments are going to become a thing, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah,
partly because
tournaments aren't very easy to facilitate.
Well, it's just, how do you determine a winner? Is it the guy who made it to the end, and the guy who made it to the end was the guy sitting in the corner for 40 minutes and got the final kill and went, woo? Or are they going to determine it's a straight out killing thing, which then makes you wonder, what is PUBG? Is it the guy who survives to the end is the winner, or is it the guy who decimated everyone?
Well, back up a second there, and I'm just gonna bring a point up when you talk about Fortnite. Is back to my point is that Fortnite had its own game. Fortnite was not a battle royale game. So when you talk about it having more to it, like the building of traps and structure building, because that's what Fortnite was doing. Fortnite was a tower defense game, and it literally took the PUBG formula and smashed it into Fortnite. So by nature, of course, Fortnite will have everything PUBG has and more, because it was never a PUBG game. So that would explain that, right? And I agree with your point that at some point PUBG is literally just what it is. There's no other elements to the game besides get your stuff, find gear, and kill the other players before you get killed. Stewart, what's your thoughts on the PUBG effect?
I find it interesting. I've played couple dozen games of PUBG.
I was there when your computer actually overheated from playing PUBG and blew your power supply.
Well, okay, it wasn't PUBG's fault necessarily. It was,
you were running your computer hot.
The extreme age of my power supply, but yes, that did in fact happen.
That would have been your first hint.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. It's like, oh god, it smells like ozone, and then everything went black.
And I was there for it. Okay, I didn't want to segue, but continue.
Yeah, so thank you for embarrassing me. But in all seriousness, it's really fun. Like I don't know, like I find I go through cycles where it's like, oh wow, this is awesome, and then I'll play like maybe like one or two games where I just get like one shot at the very beginning, and it's like it's such a random experience. I find like the skill gap is huge, which I think the market is starving for, is games where the equipment and the environment don't compensate for a lack of skill. Like you can get really, really good at PUBG and do really, really well. So I think that might have something to do with it, where it's like it's a lot more precision than say something like Call of Duty.
Well, let me stop you there, because my other thought of PUBG when I was coming up with topics to discuss is it seems like PUBG has taken everything that has evolved as far as the shooter genre and thrown it out the window. So Josh, follow me here. We look at shooters now where they started off back where PUBG was, where it was very skill-based, minimal power-ups, very clean. And then we've seen shooters evolve to the point where there's perks, there's loadouts, there's progression, there's attachments, all crazy stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So now shooters are throwing the kitchen sink at these games to give you all these different extras. And along comes PUBG that says, screw it, we're just going to throw a bunch of people down with nothing, and there's no progression. There's no perks. There's no anything besides what you find, and that's the game. And it's almost like PUBG is reversing the trend to what we've seen with Call of Duties and Halos and Battlefields and stuff like that, right? To what you just said, right, Stewart, as far as the skill gap, it's just literally now back down to your reflexes and abilities.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say there's no progression. It's just nothing that anybody that sort of thinks of progression would think about. Like, the progression is almost entirely aesthetically based.
Yes. And you don't have loadouts and perks and such. Yeah. So
no, right. But like, part of the skill of the game is identifying drop points, key drop points, and weighing the risks of how quick you are, how quickly you can get to the ground from where the plane is going, to getting a viable weapon loadout, versus how quickly everybody else will. Like, it's a game that's quite unlike anything I've played before, and I think that's sort of what I liked about it.
Well, let me cycle back around and start with you, Josh. Do you think, now that we know it's successful, we know a small handful of developers have started integrating Battle Royale into their games, are we going to brace ourselves, and is this now going to be a massive thing moving forward, like to the point where, remember when Call of Duty came out with, well, not Call of Duty, sorry, when Gears of War came out with Horde mode, and then we started seeing Horde mode, quote unquote, Horde mode pop up in every freaking game, right? The whole survival wave concept, which now every single game has. Do you think PUBG's got the influence now, or do you think it's just going to remain sort of a niche thing, and maybe we'll see it peter out in a year? What's your thought? I mean, I'm not saying you're an expert in the industry, but let me just say, what do you think is going to happen with the PUBG effect?
I'm going to call it now. There could be some haters, but I'd say PUBG is going to die and something else is going to take its place. I think there's definitely a niche for something there.
Yeah.
And I think a game is going to dethrone PUBG.
What do you think? Why do you think that's? I have my opinion. I'm going to tell you guys at the end why, but I agree with you, Josh. Why do you think? What do you think is going to be like? Why do you think that's going to happen?
I will here's my 2 cents into why I think PUBG is on its way out. Is it sat in alpha on PC or beta, either way, for like a really long time. There is glitches, there's rubber banding, there's issues picking up weapons not firing correctly, all sorts of issues. And they're like, guys, it's a beta. Don't worry, these are beta things. But when they released on Xbox One, they forced themselves to release the game, which caused more glitches, issues, and everything. It's a game that is got tons of players, and it should not be having these issues, period. And they are, and that's why I think they're done, and something else is going to step in. And I actually think Fortnite is actually becoming bigger because the game is actually
stable.
Yeah,
stable. Even regardless of which one takes fun or anything, nothing worse than playing a game and you try to land, and you just see all these clips of people just glitching through walls, getting stuck on trees and then slamming into the ground, dying, like all sorts of stuff. And you look at players and no one, you're like, you guys have like millions of players. Like, what is happening?
Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts, Stewart, on the longevity of the PUBG effect?
I can attest to the lag issues, the errors, the times when I'll be driving and then suddenly I'll have like a 5-second lag, which doesn't sound like much, but obviously anybody who's ever played a game like this, it's huge. And at the end, when the sort of lag is concluded, I'm dead. And it's like, it's not like that. I would say more than anything was the main catalyst for me stepping back from PUBG was just how buggy it was.
Is it a netcode issue, Josh? Like, is this developer not putting the back-end maintenance in to make sure that the 100 players are accommodated? Like, they're making money off this, obviously, if you're buying it, but are they just not keeping their netcode up, or are they an inexperienced developer, or what do you think?
This is going to be my opinion that'll get me shot, but be frank, I don't think they give a crap. to be honest. Like, there's no reason. They've got Microsoft pretty much backing them now, putting it on the Xbox One and everything, and they're basically sitting back to go, money. Why fix it? We're rich.
So they're a small developer that got lightning in a bottle.
I would say so, pretty much. Who is it? Who makes it? That's a golden question.
I don't know.
Designer Brendan Green. Okay. See, the thing that kills me the most is the fact that it is on Unreal Engine 4 and it looks like that.
Yeah.
You see all these videos where they show all these great things, and then you look at that and you're like, huh.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah.
So while Josh is looking that up, Stu,
Yeah.
what's your final thought on the PUBG effect as far as longevity and what's going to happen, say, moving forward into 2018 with either that game or other games that are trying to emulate it?
Well, like, you know, I think competition is always good, you know, in these kind of market systems. I think PUBG has some major structural issues that it needs to take care of, and I think for, you know, pretty good reason that Josh pointed out, they're not, at least for the short term, going to be taking care of that. I would like to see it stay for a while. I think it offers a unique experience just in terms of the size of the map and the number of players and just the wild shenanigans you can get up to in it. I think it would not be this popular. Microsoft would not have invested money in it if it was not a good concept.
So it's not going to be a flash in the pan. Otherwise,
Yeah,
Microsoft
they have something. Microsoft does not make these decisions lightly.
Correct.
They have obviously seen something worthwhile in this system, and I think we might see something very different in the future. We might even see a completely different game, but something very similar. I think for the reason that I stated, that it is such a low or a large skill gap, like there's not much compression in that, that it's really taking people by storm. They're enjoying the fact that they can work out their strategy and, you know, like train and like figure out how to best optimize everything. They like that. It's fun, right? They used to, you know, do that with games like Call of Duty before it became what it is today, or like, you know, Street Fighter.
Working skills.
People enjoy the technique.
Let me give you my theory on PUBG. Now that we're coming around the table, I sort of have a hybrid view on it. Like I get that it's going to be around for a bit. I think the player base is going to move on, and it's very one simple thing as far as I think. And again, it could be wrong. I don't think there's enough meat on the bone. At the moment, what I'm seeing is a very cool experience. What I have seen when people have played it, including yourself, is that it's turning into I just got killed, say 5 minutes into the game, 10 minutes in the game, and what do? Well, you disconnect and you wait for the next match, or you go find another match. So it's creating a very vicious cycle that I've seen in other shooters, where it's the respawn loop, where you die, you respawn, you die, you respawn, and that's catering to attention spans that are, you know, shorter than my pinky finger. I think there's not enough meat on the bones. I think this game is fun, but at some point people are going to look for more out of their gaming time, whether that be a shared co-op experience, whether that be a progression-based role player. I just think that there's enough alternatives out for gamers' time that might give them more fulfillment out of it. And if you don't do well at PUBG, at some point you're going to be like, I just played this game for an hour and I suck and I don't get anywhere. Maybe I could have spent that time playing Destiny or another game that's going to give me a little bit more fulfillment, right? So to your point, Stewart, maybe the game will evolve. Maybe we'll see more maps, more modes. Maybe we'll even see some form of a cooperative experience, which they obviously have with multi-person drops and such. But I don't think the PUBG formula that we see right now is going to last. And no, I don't think we'll see a widespread cloning of the PUBG formula. I think we'll see a few knockoffs and stuff here. But I think I think other companies will probably not just jump on for the sake of it.
Mhm.
So let's leave the PUBG effect. I think we dug our teeth into that one. Sticking on our gaming theme here, I'm gonna bounce over to tabletop, so we don't just do straight video game but tabletop. We're gonna jump over to a tabletop topic. This is one that again that I come up with, and it's been bugging me. And we're gonna call this one the Star Wars effect, or rather, Star Wars in the tabletop industry is too much Star Wars not a good thing, or is too much Star Wars a good thing? So Stewart, you might have some really out of the gate opinions on this, but I'll lay the groundwork.
Yeah.
So right now we have a very thriving tabletop industry right now. We're seeing what is it, like the golden age is what I think, did you refer to it as the golden age, Stu?
Yeah, people have said that. I'm not the first person to say that for sure.
Yeah. So we're seeing a massive resurgence, and what we're also seeing is a lot of companies who previously hadn't been in this market now making games, and there's a lot of great games out there. If you just look hard enough, you're going to see something for anybody. In particular, we have Fantasy Flight Games, who have the Star Wars license for tabletop role-playing, and they are just cranking out product left, right, and center. I took it a step back and realized that I don't have the pocketbook to accommodate all the Star Wars tabletop games that are being thrown at me. So that brings up my point. With all this Star Wars stuff out there, is it actually growing the tabletop business, or is Fantasy Flight still just sort of churning their existing clients by giving them more Star Wars options, but not really growing the pool of overall players? So let's go right to you, Stewart. What's your thoughts on Star Wars on the tabletop side of things?
I mean, I personally have not gotten super into the majority of Fantasy Flight's licensed Star Wars content, right? I have some of the Star Wars role-playing games. They're phenomenally well written and well put together books.
Yeah.
I love the dice system. I could talk about how much I love those dice, and
you have talked about it on a previous video.
Yeah, the sort of the development of that into the Genesis system, but that is for another time. In terms of X-Wing, Armada, Legion, Destiny,
Imperial Assault,
thank you, and the card game, I don't have any of that. They don't fill like a sort of hobby void in my heart. I'm just like, I don't like the styles, I guess, but you know, they're obviously massively popular. I think we are approaching, if not at the kind of apex, I think, of where it will be, but I think there's enough market share to deal with what they have now.
Right.
Like I feel like the card game, I believe it is a living card game.
Yes,
so
correct.
It's not a TCG.
One.
It's a living card game. And Destiny are games that you can play with other games. It's not something that
doesn't compete directly with it.
Yeah, it's not filling a major slot in your, like, just not even in terms of finances, but just in terms of actual like mental bandwidth to deal with it.
Yeah, it's a side game. That's what I called it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, here's an interesting thing. So I did a video on Imperial Assault versus Legion, and there's a lot of opinions, and I won't get into it. But from my point of view, and I'll cycle back to Josh sort of at the end of this topic because I've got some really heartfelt opinions, is I love Imperial Assault. I've been playing it, and I've bought Imperial Assault product. The biggest concern that when Legion was announced is that they're now asking all these tabletop players to go out and buy even more stormtroopers and rebel soldiers, and literally buy the same figures they've already bought already with Imperial Assault. But guess what they did? They made the scale different.
Yeah, I know. That was absurd.
So they basically said, here's a new game, but we don't want you using all these figures that we just made for you with that other game.
Yeah.
Even though the two games are quite literally miniature games with like iconic characters, right? So for me, it kind of pushed it,
and a slightly larger stormtrooper.
Yeah, and it kind of just pushed my pocketbook out of budget, and yet we see a massive amount of people just swarming in that are excited for Legion, and I get it because it's exciting. It's a different type of game. It's a large scale battle game, but I think for me, they've pushed me too far on how much I can invest in the Star Wars hobby, and that's such I won't be getting Legion. Josh, from a non-passionate tabletop miniature gamer, because I know that it's not your forte, you're sitting on the outskirts of this whole Legion, Imperial Assault, and Star Wars thing. What's your thought when it comes to Star Wars and its impact and overall, is too much Star Wars a good thing or a bad thing in the tabletop side of things?
That's going to be tough to weigh out on the board game side of things, but I'll take it as like a very broad stroke because I'm not a participant in it. I'd say at the time right now, ever since, it's going to hurt, Disney took over, there's been just too much. And I mean, it's not that it hasn't been good, it just doesn't feel like it's fleshed out. And I think that's where the board games are starting to feel for me, and the miniatures and everything, is it just feels like they're like, Star Wars is big, release stuff, just put it out. And it just doesn't feel like there's any story or thought behind it. It's more, hey, Star Wars is popular, let's sell Star Wars.
Let's capitalize on it. Yeah, because I mean, to your point, if they were thinking, they may have made some compatibilities with some of these games, like Armada and X-Wing, for example, being the older ones. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Stewart, you might know. I don't think there's any synergy between those two where there should be.
Well, I mean,
you're looking at large-scale fleet-based and small-scale starfighter, yet there's no connective threads.
Yeah, the problem is that like an X-Wing, which is, like a main unit in X-Wing, is like, smaller than a grain of rice in Armada. Like they're like I think it's the I might get hate for this because I can't remember the name, but it's basically the ship that they're flying at the beginning of episode 4, right?
Yeah,
that's in both games.
The Carillion Corvette, yeah.
Yeah, right. So they got one for Armada that's about that big, and then one for X-Wing that's like, bigger than I can fit on camera, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I always found that kind of funny.
Well,
it would be difficult, I think, to make any synergy. I think the problem with Legion and Assault is a much more direct one to deal with because they are literally the same scale.
Yeah, they're millimeters apart.
It's a much more egregious offense.
Right, and so to Josh's point, I kind of feel the same way. I feel like Fantasy Flight's saying, let's just throw Star Wars into whatever game we can throw at people because it'll sell. Not to say that they don't have quality stuff. I mean, their stuff is quality, but I don't think they're really giving thought to the gamer, right? Like if they were thinking, they would have said, hey, let's make Legion an expansion of what we've already done. Let's make it so that there's a connective thread, and let's maybe make it so that you can play a game of Legion, and let's create a set of rules that lets them now go into, hey, let's go into a skirmish mode, where the heroes have gone from the massive battlefield to going inside of a bunker, and now we can play out a smaller scale game. So, to Josh's point, I think he's fair in saying that they literally are throwing stuff because they know we're going to buy it. Now, as far as to end your point, Josh, because you're always very insightful when it comes to global things like this, are we just going to get flooded to death with Star Wars? Is this just going to be a thing we have to live with, or will people literally throw their arms up at some point and go, okay, it's too much Star Wars? Like me, for example, they say, look, my wallet's only so big. You're not going to get my money for this game. I'm just going to keep playing this game only.
I'm going to say yes and no.
Like, is there a breaking point?
They're going to see a plateau, and there's going to be hot flashes in the pan. I mean, going with Disney and stuff, they'll release whatever movies they just don't do well, and suddenly they'll hit something. Frozen, I'm sure everybody can understand that one, where it's just suddenly like, oh my gosh, it's freaking everywhere. They're playing the song left, right, and center. I think the same thing's going to happen with Star Wars, just for the simple fact that they've announced a new trilogy. There's going to be a movie like every year. They're going to alternate for main and not, which is going to create new characters, new ships, new everything. And I think instead of it being an, oh my gosh, it's been 2 years, here comes a new Star Wars film, it's going to be, oh, it's another Star Wars film.
So it kind of loses its specialness because now we have too much of it and we can get it all the time.
Exactly, and that's where it's just going to plateau. They're not going to sell a ton. They're not going to sell nothing. It's just, it's there.
Yeah, and so likewise, my friend was mentioning that they could in essence just be churning the pot with their existing players who buy their products, right? We go, players who play X-Wing are going to move to whatever is new. Imperial Assault players will move to this, and they're not really growing. They're just selling to the same 50 million people or whatever it is they sell.
Yep. Yeah. But money's money.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, that's good. I mean, it's worth keeping an eye on, but very insightful. It proves that Star Wars is not invulnerable. Possibly, we'll see. So moving on, let's talk about a favorite topic that you always love to talk about, Josh. Give you something to chew on tonight, and it's a game called Detroit Become Human.
Yay!
Yeah, because it doesn't get. Now, here's the thing about this. Here's the thing. This game comes from developer Quantic Dreams, I think. And it is the same company who did Heavy Rain, and what was the other one with the Ellen Page in it?
Beyond Two Souls.
Beyond Two Souls, and it's an interesting developer because they've literally chosen to create their own subgenre of gaming. I don't even know what this subgenre is called because it was literally a unique style of game, and this is the newest one, and some comments have started to circulate that I've started to see people don't get it. I mean, it's not quite established in their minds what kind of games these are. So just let's throw it out to you. Detroit Become Human. What kind of game? What are we dealing with here? And what's the background on that particular game?
Oh, I'm gonna take it and run here.
Okay.
I think this game is going to be amazing. Of course, going off trailers and everything like that, it feels like this game is actually going to be a true choice game. And when I say that, I'm going to let's try not to spoil any other game. How do I explain this one? Most games, it seems that, let's take Fable, because people were talking about it in the chat room and everything. You could either be good or you could be bad, but you pretty much ended at the same end point, you're a person, you achieve your goal, you end your goal. Where it looks like in Detroit Become Human, there's a lot more story arcs in it. So hopefully they're going to keep that where, a choice you make will actually alter the story instead of the Mass Effect syndrome where everybody had an argument. But that as you ended, you pretty much just chose your shade of ending, which you all ended up there. Whether you're good, bad, neutral, everyone made it to the same point.
Right, and so what you're saying is your decisions are kind of superfluous, meaning they're there, but they don't really alter the gameplay in any way.
Yeah, you pretty much take a slightly different path, but you're all ending up at the same destination, which Detroit Become Human, as they show when they do the split out of all the things you can grab, interact, say, and do, looks like there's going to be a lot more choices, and I love those in games, because the replay value for me shoots up, and it's great.
Now, Stewart, have you heard of any of the 3 games that I mentioned?
I've heard a bit about Detroit Become Human, and it looks interesting. I know we were talking earlier about concerns that it would be like quick time event the game. I think I'm going to be with Josh on this one. It looks like the sort of apex of that type of game that sort of transcends the kind of difficult skill-based narrative progression and becomes just a visual storytelling medium.
It becomes a cerebral experience as opposed to a reflex-based experience.
Like you're going through characters and advancing a story, right? And it's cool because I've read that even when a character dies, you will simply progress to another character. Like
So
it flows forward, and I think it will be kind of a very unique experience. I hope.
Do you think gamers will get it?
Yeah, I hope it doesn't go over people's heads. But then I feel like you have to have as much faith in your audience as possible because, I think it's important to not treat them like children because they aren't children. These are adults. I think enough people will get it that this game will get the respect that it deserves. Hopefully.
Well, here's my take on it is that it's developers like this that's going to keep the gaming industry alive. Because, at a basic level, we can't just keep churning out the same type of games, for infinity, right? Like at some point we'll get to a point. I mean, the video game crash of the late 70s, early 80s was as a result of people just copying other people's games to the point where it was all just garbage. So this makes me happy that we see developers pushing the envelope for storytelling. Do I think it's going to sell like crazy? Yeah, I don't think it's going to break any records, and hopefully it makes enough money to see further games in this subgenre. Josh, you wouldn't happen to know how any of the previous titles that we mentioned did, without specifics. I mean, like just as a general internet chatter, did they succeed? Were they considered successful products? They were PlayStation 3.
I don't know how well they did, but I do know that people loved it, especially with Heavy Rain, and how that ended just blew people's minds on it. In a sense, the things you had to do, like it really pushed you to decide what you wanted to do. And
well, I think you have a playthrough on that we've never finished.
I don't know if it actually got all uploaded or not.
Yeah,
I should finish. That being said, but
are these PS4 exclusives still?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Or technically, Heavy Rain was PlayStation 3.
Right, but
it's that old.
Detroit is going to be a PS4 exclusive.
Yeah, they're keeping them pretty much exclusives. I think only one of their games from them was actually on anything that wasn't PlayStation, and that was it's like Fahrenheit and Omicron, if I remember correctly, were from that studio, and those ones are like on the Dreamcast and Xbox and stuff like that. But ever since Heavy Rain, they went straight exclusive.
Do we have a release date yet?
Release date, I think it's going to be in March, maybe. I don't. It's kind of. I don't think they'll lock down a date. I think they're going to say spring, not summer. So up until April, as long as they don't push it. But it looks like it's on track.
Okay. Let's finish off the night talking about a topic that Stewart brought up, and it's a little bit meaty, but we'll try and break it down. Let's just kick it off. I've titled it "3D Printing Ahead of Its Time." Stu, give us a quick introduction on the whole concept that we're talking about. Try and keep Cole's notes in mind.
Okay, so this is just something I've been running into as I'm trying to prepare to really dive into a bunch of games. But the sort of proliferation of free assets online for 3D printing, mostly terrain for games, for miniature games.
And you're talking about not, when you say free assets, we're not talking about the product printed, we're talking about the schematics.
Yeah, I'm talking about a file that will allow a 3D printer to create a three-dimensional image of what you want. It's massive. There's so much stuff out there, but very few people actually have the printers capable of producing these super high fidelity prints cheaply enough, right? I've looked into several different local and not so local companies or groups that do these services, the 3D print stuff for you, and the cost is astronomical. It's obscene. There's nothing even close to economically viable yet to produce the scale of models that I need to actually get what I want. And it's frustrating when you see people in these communities that are posting these beautiful pieces of terrain that they're making, and it's not even remotely possible for me to even begin to approach what they're doing, just because I don't have the money to have even somebody else print it for me.
Come on, Stu. Come on, get yourself a 3D printer, right?
Yeah. Get myself like a $2,000 or $3,000 3D printer.
No, interesting though. I have a question for you. This is a dangerous precipice that the tabletop industry is sitting on. And when I say the tabletop industry, I'm talking about developers and manufacturers of product, because I've looked at some of this content that people are putting out as far as what they're printing on 3D printers. This is something that could literally cause serious harm to some of these companies that are selling us product. If laser printers get to a point where we can afford them in our homes, a lot of these companies that are selling this product could be concerned, correct?
I don't think that, I don't know. I don't think we're close to that yet. It's just not something this is, I hesitated to even bring this up because this is such a niche issue, right? There aren't, businessmen or families who are like, geez, I really wish instead of going out and buying a fork, I could just 3D print one in my office.
Right. It won't get there.
That's not a concern people have. There is no market. This market is, tiny, right? Yeah. And the technology is progressing in accordance with that market, right? Which I think means that we are years and years away from having viable 3D printers. I find every year somebody on some forum is like, oh, it's a death of Games Workshop, or insert company here, because now we can 3D print stuff, and it's like, no, calm down, buddy.
So what you're saying is you're just plain out jealous that you don't have a laser printer in your house.
Insanely so, yes.
Okay, Josh, we'll close it off with you. How's your 3D printer doing these days?
Oh, it's back there in that closet, right? Yeah. See, I think the 3D printing is going to do one of two things on that for the people that do have printers or have access to it, because I know there are schools are gating them, all these things, is either A, it's going to force the original game makers to actually go, well, if people are making these at home, we better make better things that people do want, or B, it's going to go the other way, so the developers they'll 3D print it, just put whatever crap in the box, it's fine.
Oh yeah, right, where they'll just make PDFs for us.
Yeah, pretty much be like, yeah, you guys print out yourself, whatever.
Yeah. That would be a really bad, I like your other way where they actually make better stuff for us versus the...
I hope it goes that they decide, oh man, if people are making cheap knockups, we should make really good stuff that people do want to buy, as opposed to their cheap stuff they're making in their basement.
Yeah.
Because there's still people that do that with a model. People who did model training and stuff have the ability to, make the stuff for these miniatures and everything. It's just sometimes when you're opening up these games, don't know if you guys have it, but I've definitely bought expensive games with miniatures, and you take them out and you're like, I spent over $100 and this looks like someone made it out of Play-Doh in about 2 seconds.
He hasn't bought any Infinity games lately, obviously, but yes, I get the
not Infinity. I'm just a general rush.
Yeah.
Not every studio is like that. I'm just saying some of them are pretty much just firing out, and they're like, it's a great game, you give us money, and who cares if it's garbage.
Yeah. Okay, well, that pretty much brings us to the end of it for the night. Thank you guys for your contributions. I guess we got some things to keep an eye out. As always, to our community out there, thanks for tuning in. The podcast you just watched will be made available in audio form, as well as on our YouTube channel, which you're probably watching it in right now. That'll go up as a rebroadcast, so you'll be able to see that. And if you don't want to watch the video, you can listen to the audio version. As always, like and subscribe to Game Nexus YouTube channel. Hit us up on our website. I don't know if we've got a schedule for our podcast yet. I think the team here, we've kind of tried to aim for a weekly podcast. So we're gonna try and stay the course on our weekly. When you see it in printing, however, that's when we know it's for sure. So in the meantime, keep checking in, and thanks again.
Yep.
Okay, guys.
Bye.
We'll talk to you later.